From the dusty crossroads of a forgotten frontier town comes a tale so wild, you'll swear it has to be true. A day that began with wedding bells turned into chaos when a runaway bride found herself locked behind bars. But all is not what it seems under the scorching sun. When Sheriff Jebediah Cole steps inside that cramped iron-barred cell, he stumbles upon a secret that could rattle the entire county. As bullets fly, old grudges awaken and hidden identities unfurl. Prepare yourself for a story where betrayal and redemption collide in the Wild West like you've never seen before. It all began on what promised to be a calm morning in the small town of Drywater Gulch, named somewhat ironically for the dusty gully that sometimes held water after a hard rain. Sheriff Jebediah Jeb Cole was slowly making his rounds a habit instilled in him by his mentor, the legendary lawman Wyatt Earp, whom he'd met briefly years ago during a cattle drive dispute near Dodge City. Jeb took pride in keeping his corner of the West peaceful, from the rickety front porch of the jailhouse to the local saloon run by Mary Beth Jenkins. No one called him by his full name. Jebediah was too long for a man of few words. Sheriff Cole was known for his quiet steadiness, sharp blue eyes under a wide-brimmed hat, and a calm but firm hand on the law. He was not a man easily surprised. Yet that morning, as he opened the door to his jailhouse with its single holding cell, he was unprepared for the sight awaiting him. There, behind the iron bars, sat a young woman. Her once pristine wedding dress was torn at the hem, stained with dirt and blood. She was trembling with cold despite the desert heat. Her veil drooped limply over one shoulder, and her brown eyes flashed with a mixture of terror and defiance. Jeb took a moment to let the image sink in. This was not a standard occupant for the Drywater Gulch jail. Normally he might find a rowdy gambler, or a petty thief, or even a local drunk sobering up overnight. A bride in full regalia was certainly a first. Standing behind Jeb was his trusted deputy, Orson Pierce. Pierce, a thick-set man with a perpetual scowl, had joined Jeb after stints in rougher frontier towns. He was quietly loyal, if a touch gruff. Jeb stepped forward. "Ma'am?" He tried to keep his voice soft. "Can you tell me how you got here?" She eyed him warily from the bench where she perched. "Name's Annabelle," she said, her voice trembling. I was supposed to get married today. I ran away." Jeb didn't move any closer. He could sense the fear rolling off her in waves. "Ran away from your wedding or your groom?" he asked, leaning on the cell's bars. Annabelle swallowed, her eyes dropping to her trembling hands. "He's not who he says he is," she whispered. "And I'm not the bride everyone thinks I am." The sheriff exchanged a glance with Orson. They had encountered all manner of secrets and tall tales out in the frontier. But there was something in her eyes, something haunted and desperate, that told them this was no ordinary case. And so the quiet morning in Drywater Gulch ended with more questions than answers, and the bride behind bars refused to speak another word. Later that day, Jeb decided it was time to get to the bottom of the runaway bride's appearance. He coaxed local seamstress Harriet Doyle into bringing some water bread and a blanket for Annabelle. He hoped simple kindness might open the gates of conversation. "Thank you," Annabelle murmured, sipping from the tin cup. Harriet gave her a sympathetic smile before stepping aside to let the sheriff continue his inquiry. Orson hovered near the door, arms folded watchful as always. Jeb waited until Annabelle seemed calmer. "Ma'am," he began, "I know you said your name is Annabelle. We're going to need your full name and your story. Otherwise, I can't help you." She hesitated for a moment, pressing her lips together. Then she spoke in a hushed tone, as though each word came at great cost. "My full name is Annabel Tate. I was set to marry a man named Reginald Farnsworth. He's from back east Philadelphia. He bought a ranch outside of town. We were supposed to wed at the church this morning." Her voice wavered, and she took another sip of water. "But I learned something last night. Something about Reginald. About how he made his money back east. It turns out he's not at all who he claims to be. He's dangerous." She shuddered, tears forming in her eyes. "But how did you end up in my jail cell?" Jeb asked, his voice gentle but firm. Annabel's eyes flickered. She stared at the floor. "I ran away. In the night. I made it as far as the hills on the outskirts of town. That's when I saw something. 4 men exchanging Crate's guns from the looks of it. And Reginald was there with them. I recognized him by the ring on his hand. I tried to back away, but they heard me. They chased me through the brush. One of them tackled me. There was a struggle. I fought back. Then everything went black." She paused, voice tight. "Next thing I remember is waking up here in this cell. I don't know who brought me in or why, but I don't think it was you, Sheriff." A cold knot formed in Jeb's stomach. Someone had used his jail to hold her, or perhaps to keep her out of sight. Who on earth had the authority or the audacity to do that under his nose? He exchanged a glance with Orson. The deputy's frown deepened. Drywater Gulch was a small, relatively tranquil town, and the idea of arms deals and men roughing up a runaway bride sounded more like frontier rumors from the likes of Tombstone or Dodge City Not Here. "All right, Miss Tate," Jeb said quietly. "We'll keep you safe, but you have to trust me. Let me ask around. If what you say is true, we're dealing with more than just a broken wedding." Annabel wiped her eyes with her fingertips. "Thank you, Sheriff. Please be careful." But as Jeb turned to go, a new thought rose to the surface. How had she ended up behind bars with no official record or note? Was there a second set of keys? A hidden arrangement with the mayor or someone else in power? And who was Reginald Farnsworth, truly? Jeb stepped into Marybeth's saloon later that afternoon. The place was half empty, with only a few locals nursing whiskies in the corners. Marybeth Jenkins, a woman of bold presence and fiery red hair, greeted him with a nod from behind the bar. "Afternoon, Sheriff," she called. "You look more troubled than usual." He took a seat at the bar, removing his hat and setting it down. "Strange day, Marybeth," he admitted. "I have a question for you." She wiped down the countertop. "I'm all ears. Have you ever heard about Reginald Farnsworth, the fellow who built that big ranch outside of town?" Marybeth let out a low whistle. "He's quite the talk among the ladies from what I hear. Inherited a fortune, pharmaceuticals or something. Came out west for the air, claims it's better for his health. Bought up a big swath of land. He's been frequenting the high-stakes poker table at the far corner, spending money like he had water in the canteen." "Why do you ask?" Jeb leaned in, lowering his voice. "I need to find out if he's involved in anything unsavory. Dealings with guns. Maybe intimidation. I got reason to believe he's not what he seems." Marybeth raised a sculpted brow. "Ain't that the case with half the men out here? But Farnsworth's name has come up a time or two, with some seedy typeps. I once saw him speaking with a known gunslinger, Craig Mulligan. Mulligan travels around running contraband, usually too slippery for the law to catch. Farnsworth paid Mulligan a tidy sum just for a chat, so I heard. Jebb's frown deepened. He had some vague knowledge of Mulligan's reputation. If Farnsworth was cozying up to that scoundrel, the bride's story might be more than just a rumor. "I appreciate the tip," he said, sliding a coin across the bar for a coffee. "Let me know if you hear anything else." Marybeth poured him a cup. "You be careful, Jebb. There's a chill in the air, and not just from the desert night." Jebb nodded, sipped his coffee, and scanned the saloon. A man in dusty black attire caught his eye. He was hunched over a table nursing a drink. When he noticed Jebb's attention, he quickly turned away. Had Farnsworth planted watchers around town? Outside, as the sun began its slow descent, Jebb tugged on Orson's sleeve, and they stepped off the boardwalk into the street. "Orson, keep an eye on that fella in the saloon wearing black. I want to know if he has connections to Farnsworth. I'll check on Annabelle." Orson nodded. "Sheriff, you reckon Farnsworth is behind locking her up in our own cell?" "I'm afraid so," Jebb said quietly. "We need more proof before we make a move. But if Farnsworth's involved in gun running, and if he's from a wealthy East Coast family, he may think his money can buy the law around here. Let's see if he's right." Back at the jailhouse, Annabelle was awake, pacing the cell with anxiety drawn tight across her face. Jebb quietly unlocked the door, stepping inside. He brought a bowl of stew Harriet had prepared. She accepted it with a grateful nod, but ate only a few spoonfuls before setting it aside. "Thank you," she said softly. "I still can't believe any of this is happening." "I'd like to ask you a few more questions, if you don't mind," said Jebb. "You said you saw an arms deal. Could you describe the men?" She shook her head slowly. "It was dark, and I was running for my life. But there were at least 4 men. Farnsworth was definitely one of them. I recognized his boots and that signet ring. Another man was tall and lanky, wearing a bandana. One had a limp. That's about all I recall." Jebb nodded. "We'll do what we can to flush them out. But you need to stay safe." Suddenly the front door creaked open. In stepped a well-dressed man with a neatly trimmed mustache and a polished walking cane. Jebb recognized him, Dr. Horace Caldwell. He was a visiting physician from Philadelphia who had once treated the local blacksmith for a severe infection. Caldwell had been welcomed politely but quietly in Drywater Gulch. Everyone was always suspicious of strangers with fancy clothes. But Caldwell had proven himself helpful and had saved the blacksmith's life, so he'd earned some measure of respect. Sheriff Dr. Caldwell greeted, tipping his hat. "I heard about an incident involving Mr. Farnsworth's fiancée. I came to see if I could be of any assistance." Annabelle's eyes widened in recognition at "Caldwell," she whispered. "You're Farnsworth's friend." Caldwell sighed. "Let's say I'm an acquaintance. When I heard that Miss Tate had ended up here, I thought I might help sort out some confusion. Perhaps this is all a big misunderstanding." Jebb kept his expression neutral. "We haven't sorted out the details yet. I was just about to escort Miss Tate to a safer location until we can figure out who locked her in my jail without my approval." Caldwell pursed his lips, glancing between them. "Sheriff, I'd be careful about accusing Farnsworth of such a thing without evidence. His family name commands a great deal of influence even out here." Annabelle's cheeks flushed with anger. "That doesn't give him the right to threaten me or force me into a marriage I don't want." She stepped closer to the cell bars, voice shaking. "Dr. Caldwell, you have to know who he truly is." Caldwell merely offered a tight smile. "I understand your concerns, Miss Tate. However, I fear you may be mistaken about Mr. Farnsworth. He has many enemies who'd like to defame him. This might be part of a smear campaign. Jeb interjected, "Annabel's safety is my priority. Dr. Caldwell, if Farnsworth is a respectable man, he'll come in and clear this up. Until then, we're not letting her out of sight." Caldwell's eyes flickered. "Of course, Sheriff. I only hope you'll be impartial in your duties." He tipped his hat again and left his cane tapping against the worn floorboards. Annabel exhaled, shaking. "He's Farnsworth's ally. I'm sure of it." "What am I supposed to do?" Jeb locked eyes with her. "You trust me and Orson. We're going to unravel the truth. But you need to stay put for your own safety." Annabel swallowed hard and nodded. Late that night, Jeb tried to sleep in his cot at the back of the jailhouse, but his mind raced with questions. How had Farnsworth's men gotten hold of the jail keys? Was Farnsworth truly behind arms dealing, or was it a ploy to tarnish him? Annabel's tears and desperation felt authentic, yet Dr. Caldwell's calm dismissal left lingering doubts. Hours later, at the first pale streak of dawn, Jeb stirred to the sound of hushed voices and the click of a revolver. He jumped up, grabbing his gun belt. Outside the jailhouse, shadows moved in the dim light. In the cell, Annabel had roused as well, her face pale with fear. "Sheriff, is someone out there?" "Stay quiet," Jeb hissed, signaling her to remain hidden. He peered through the small window. 3 figures lurked outside, faces obscured by bandanas. One of them was tall and lanky, exactly as Annabel had described. Another had a noticeable limp. The men were picking at the lock, apparently trying to break in. Possibly they intended to seize Annabel, or worse. Jeb's heart pounded. He beckoned Orson, who'd been dozing in a chair near the door. The deputy snapped awake, drew his revolver, and nodded. On a silent 3 count, they threw open the door. Light spilled out onto the street. "Stop right there," Jeb ordered. The intruders froze for half a second, then one of them raised a pistol. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the still dawn air. Jeb ducked to the side, returning fire. Orson, his aim steady, fired 2 shots, both hitting the tall, lanky assailant. The man dropped with a cry. Another bullet grazed Jeb's shoulder, a burning streak of pain tearing through his flesh, but he bit back any sound and fired again. The man with the limp jerked backward, clutching his arm, but managed to escape, hobbling into the darkness. The 3rd intruder laid down, covering fire, and vanished as well. When the smoke cleared, Jeb clutched his wounded shoulder. Orson carefully approached the fallen man. He was still alive, panting heavily. Orson kicked the gun away and grabbed the bandana, pulling it down to reveal a scarred face. "This one's Craig Mulligan," Orson said grimly. "Of course it is," Jeb muttered, pressing a hand against his throbbing wound. Mulligan had the exact lean build of a wanted gunslinger. If Farnsworth was aligned with Mulligan, that was damning evidence indeed. "Orson, fetch Doc Wilcox," Jeb said, referring to the local physician, a kindly older man. "I'll question Mulligan once he's patched up." Orson hesitated, noticing the blood soaking Jeb's sleeve. "Sheriff, you're injured too." "I'll manage," Jeb said firmly. "Annabel, are you all right?" Inside, Annabel nodded, though her eyes were wide with shock. "I'm fine. Did you kill them?" Jeb managed a grim half-smile. "No. One's wounded and in custody. The others ran off. Don't worry, we'll find out who sent them." Behind him, streaks of sunrise lit up the dusty road, and Jeb silently vowed that Mulligan's confession would be the key to unraveling the darkness creeping over Drywater Gulch. Doc Wilcox arrived within minutes, summoned by Orson's frantic knocks. He patched Jeb's shoulder with efficiency, no bullet lodged, just a graze, and then turned his attention to Mulligan, who'd taken a shot to the side and was losing blood fast. "Don't let him die," Jeb urged in a low voice. Doc Wilcox nodded. While Mulligan groaned on the jailhouse floor, Doc worked to stabilize him. Annabelle watched from her cell, pressing her lips together. She had never witnessed such violence up close. A wave of guilt and fear washed over her. Jeb noticed her expression and turned away to give her space. At length, Mulligan's bleeding slowed. Doc Wilcox finished binding the wound, then stood. "He's stable but weak. Don't push him too hard, Sheriff." Jeb nodded, thanked the doctor, and stepped back into the jail with Orson, who was training his revolver on Mulligan. The wounded gunslinger lay propped against the wall, breathing raggedly. Jeb knelt beside him, his own shoulder bandaged tight. "All right, Mulligan, you're alive. You want to stay that way, you'd best start talking. Who sent you?" Mulligan coughed, spat blood onto the floor. "Go to hell, Cole," he muttered. Jeb shared a look with Orson, then grabbed Mulligan by the shirt collar, grimacing at the pain in his own wound. "Don't test me. I know Farnsworth's behind this, so let's save time." Mulligan's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You think I'm scared of Farnsworth? He's just a fancy city boy, with more money than sense. We've got bigger players out here." "What's that mean?" Jeb demanded. Mulligan smiled darkly, blood staining his teeth. "If you think Farnsworth's the boss, you're barking up the wrong tree. He's just the money man. The real mastermind. Well, you wouldn't believe me if I told you." Frustration surged through Jeb. "Try me." Mulligan took a shuddering breath. "This town, it's got a secret. There's a major railroad route planned when it comes. Land prices will skyrocket. Farnsworth's group wants to keep the route hush-hush, then buy up property cheap. The guns. They're for scaring folks off their land if they don't sell. But Farnsworth's just a puppet. The real man behind it is Judge Marcus Caldwell." The name took a moment to register. Caldwell. The only Caldwell Jeb knew was Dr. Horace Caldwell from Philadelphia. Unless, had Mulligan gotten the name wrong? Or was Dr. Caldwell's father, or some relative the judge, pulling the strings? Orson whistled low. Judge Caldwell heard that name when I was down in Tucson. Rumors of a corrupt judge shaping railroad routes for personal gain. Mulligan grinned mirthlessly. They're not just rumors. Farnsworth is in bed with him figuratively, that is. Caldwell calls the shots from behind a polished desk back east. But Farnsworth is the hand that does the dirty work out here. He paused, wincing in pain. I was paid to keep an eye on Farnsworth's fiancée. Didn't realize she was going to squeal about some gun deal. The orders were simple: snuff her out if she got too nosy. Annabelle gasped, gripping the cell bars. Her face had turned ashen. Jeb's expression grew taut with anger. "You almost succeeded. But not on my watch, Mulligan." The gunslinger let his head slump back against the wall. "Well, now you know. Not that it'll do you much good. If Farnsworth doesn't kill you, Caldwell might. They've got big pockets and bigger guns. And me, I'm as good as dead." Jeb grabbed the jail cell keys. "Orson, lock him up in the back. Double the guard. We'll keep Mulligan alive long enough for him to testify." Annabelle sank onto the bench, shaking her head. "I never meant for any of this. I just wanted to escape a marriage I felt forced into." Jeb placed a hand gently on her shoulder through the bars. "It's not your fault. You've helped shine a light on a bigger conspiracy." He turned to Orson. Now we've got a name, Judge Marcus Caldwell, and we know Farnsworth's an accomplice. Next step is to figure out how Dr. Horace Caldwell fits into this. We have to move carefully. There's no telling how many hired guns Farnsworth has around. Word of the early morning gunfight spread like wildfire through Drywater Gulch. By midday, Mayor John Harrington, an older man with silver hair, summoned Sheriff Cole to his modest office near the center of town. Sheriff Cole, the mayor said sternly, tapping his cane on the floor, "I hear there was a shootout on Main Street at dawn. One man's in your custody wounded, and you yourself were grazed by a bullet." "Yes, sir," Jeb replied, standing straight. Mayor Harrington adjusted his spectacles. "I've had Farnsworth in here for a heated discussion. He claims you shot one of his men without cause." A flare of anger shot through Jeb. "That's not true. They tried to break into my jail with the obvious intent to harm Miss Annabel Tate. We returned fire in self-defense." The mayor eyed him. "Is it true Farnsworth stands accused of illegal arms dealings?" "Farnsworth stands implicated." "Yes," Jeb said carefully. "We have a wounded outlaw named Craig Mulligan who confessed Farnsworth's involvement. Mulligan also named a bigger fish, Judge Marcus Caldwell. Farnsworth might just be the local agent of Caldwell's scheme." Mayor Harrington's face paled slightly at the mention of Judge Caldwell. "This is serious. If Farnsworth is in cahoots with a judge, that suggests deep corruption. We must tread lightly, Sheriff. I don't want the town caught in the crossfire of some bigger power struggle." Jeb's jaw tightened. "I understand, sir. But justice is justice. Our duty is to ensure Farnsworth and his associates can't keep menacing this town. If we do nothing, they'll either terrorize landowners or start a full-scale war." The mayor studied Jeb, then sighed, setting aside his spectacles. "Very well, Sheriff Cole. I'll trust your judgment on this. But be warned, Farnsworth's wealth buys him allies. You'll need solid evidence if we're to stand up against him, and especially if any of this reaches Judge Caldwell. Don't let your guard down." "Yes, sir," Jeb said firmly, tipping his hat. He left the mayor's office with a renewed sense of determination. Farnsworth must be feeling the heat now that Mulligan was captured. That meant Farnsworth would either retreat or lash out viciously. Jeb suspected the latter. At dusk, Jeb walked Annabel over to the local boarding house, run by an elderly widow named Ruth Pierce, no relation to Orson, but every bit as tough. Jeb had made arrangements for Annabel to hide there until they could fully expose Farnsworth. "This is for your safety," Jeb murmured as they passed through the side entrance. "I trust Mrs. Pierce. She'll keep a watchful eye." Annabel's gaze trembled. "Thank you, Sheriff. I never thought I'd run away from my wedding and end up in a mess like this." He gave her a reassuring nod, then left Orson on guard. Meanwhile, Jeb planned to slip out under cover of darkness to Farnsworth's ranch. It was risky, maybe even foolhardy, but he needed evidence. If Mulligan had told the truth, there might be stashed weapons or incriminating documents. By midnight, the sky was a sweep of stars, and Jeb rode his horse buckshot with a lantern shuttered to a narrow slit of light. The Farnsworth ranch sat on rolling land dotted with mesquite and cactus. The big house Farnsworth had constructed loomed in the moonlight, its porch lamp flickering. Jeb tethered buckshot at a safe distance, wincing as his shoulder still throbbed. Then he crept forward. He circled the house, scanning the windows. Light flickered in an upstairs room, and now and then he saw a silhouette pacing. Could that be Farnsworth? Or Dr. Caldwell? Jeb had no illusions about strolling inside, unchallenged. He expected armed guards. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a small outbuilding behind the main barn. A faint glow of light seeped from its cracks. He carefully made his way to the outbuilding. Pressing his ear to the wooden slats, he heard muted voices. Peering through a narrow gap, Jeb spotted crates, large ones, a few opened to reveal rifles, revolvers, and boxes of ammunition. His blood boiled. Mulligan hadn't been lying. Farnsworth was indeed stockpiling weapons likely for intimidation or resale. Then Jeb noticed the speakers. One was Farnsworth's tall, slicked-back hair, wearing a tailored vest and an expensive watch chain. The second man stepping into the glow was Dr. Horace Caldwell. The conversation snagged Jeb's attention. "The judge expects results." Farnsworth Caldwell was saying, his voice low but urgent. "Your bungling has put us at risk. Mulligan's capture is no small matter. If he talks, the entire operation is compromised." Farnsworth sneered. "Don't you think I know that? But what can I do if the sheriff is babysitting that damned woman around the clock? I need to remove her from the picture." Caldwell shook his head. "Judge Caldwell has invested a lot of money and influence in this. If the sheriff continues meddling, we'll find a way to neutralize him. Meanwhile, I'll arrange a contingency. By the time the railroad deal becomes public, we must own every piece of land worth buying." Jeb's pulse hammered in his ears. This was the smoking gun, the proof of a conspiracy. He scanned the darkness, searching for any evidence he could quietly slip away with. But the outbuilding door suddenly opened wider, flooding the night with lantern light. Jeb retreated into the shadows, holding his breath. Farnsworth stepped out, glancing around. For a tense moment, Jeb feared Farnsworth had seen him, but Farnsworth lit a cigar, then waved for Caldwell to follow him to the main house. They strolled away, leaving the outbuilding locked behind them. Jeb exhaled. He had all the confirmation he needed, but it was dangerously circumstantial. He needed tangible proof. A letter or ledger might do it. Slipping around to the back of the outbuilding, he noticed a small window partially ajar. But the window was barred. He wouldn't be able to climb in without tools or a loud commotion. Pressing his lips together in frustration, Jeb realized he had to pull back. He'd learned enough to know Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell were definitely working for the judge. Tomorrow, Jeb would present the evidence to the mayor and gather a posse to raid the ranch. But he had to do it swiftly before Farnsworth and Caldwell decided to disappear or strike first. Just before dawn, Jeb returned to town, exhausted but resolute. He found Orson waiting at the jailhouse, arms folded. "You look half dead," Sheriff Orson said, eyeing Jeb's dusty clothes. "Please tell me you found something useful." Jeb told him everything he overheard. Orson's eyes widened. "We've got to move fast," the deputy said. "Farnsworth might decide to hightail it now that Mulligan's singing like a canary." "I agree. Round up the men we can trust. Deputy Sam, a few ranchers who owe me a favor. We'll talk to the mayor and get legal backing for a raid." A groan rose from the back cell where Mulligan lay. Jeb walked over to him. "You're lucky you're still breathing," he told the gunslinger. "We found the stash of guns. You told the truth. Now I need something more. Where might Farnsworth keep incriminating documents?" Mulligan coughed. "His study, I'd wager. He's got a safe. Combination is 4 digits, heard him mention the year his father died, 1878. He winced. "You didn't hear that from me." Jeb nodded. "I'll keep it in mind. If we take Farnsworth in, I'll make sure the real judge in Tucson, hears your testimony." Maybe you get a lighter sentence." Mulligan just snorted. How generous. Outside, the sun peered over the horizon, coloring the dusty sky pink. Jeb felt the weight of a looming storm. A confrontation with Farnsworth and Caldwell was inevitable. By noon, Jeb had assembled a small posse of 6 men: Orson, Deputy Sam Reed, 2 ranchers, Billings and Alvarez, plus 2 volunteers from the local militia. Mayor Harrington gave Jeb the official approval to bring Farnsworth in for questioning, thanks to the growing evidence. Annabelle, however, insisted on accompanying them. "He tried to kill me," she reminded Jeb. "I'm the reason you even know about this. I won't cower while you put yourselves in danger." At first, Jeb refused, but Annabelle countered. "You'll need me to identify Farnsworth's men, especially if they try to deny everything." Reluctantly, Jeb agreed, but made her promise to stay hidden behind the posse until it was safe. With that settled, the group mounted up and rode out to the Farnsworth ranch. The air was thick with tension as they approached. They halted at the gate, where a single guard dozed by a barrel. He jolted awake upon seeing them. "State your business," he barked, hand dropping to his rifle. Jeb held up a piece of paper. "We have legal authority to search this property and bring Mr. Farnsworth in for questioning. Hand over your weapon." The guard hesitated, then raised his rifle. But Orson's revolver was faster aimed squarely at the guard's chest. The man thought better of it and let the gun drop. They pressed forward, each footstep echoing in the tense quiet. The ranch yard was deserted. A few horses nickered in the corral. Billings and Alvarez split off to check the barn. Jeb, Orson and the others advanced toward the main house. The double doors burst open before they even reached them, revealing Farnsworth flanked by 2 hired guns. Dr. Horace Caldwell lurked behind them, anxiety etched on his face. "What's the meaning of this?" "Sheriff." Farnsworth demanded, his voice dripping with feigned indignation. "You come barging onto my property with armed men." Jeb stepped forward, spurs clicking. "We have a warrant to search your premises for illegal arms and to bring you in for questioning regarding attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." Farnsworth's eyes flickered with anger. Mulligan squealed. "Didn't he?" "I think you did that yourself by storing crates of rifles in your outbuilding," Jeb replied. "Now step aside or we'll put you aside." One of Farnsworth's gunslingers reached for his weapon, but Orson was ready. "Don't," the deputy growled. Dr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Sheriff, there must be a misunderstanding." Annabelle spoke up from behind Jeb, stepping forward. "No misunderstanding, Dr. Caldwell. I heard you. You're working with Farnsworth, and you answer to Judge Caldwell." "You threatened my life," Farnsworth sneered. "I only threatened what was necessary for business." Annabelle glared at him. "So you admit it?" Suddenly, Farnsworth's face contorted with fury. He reached inside his coat. Time seemed to slow as Jeb watched Farnsworth's hand close around a gleaming pistol. In one swift move, Farnsworth pulled and fired. But Farnsworth hadn't accounted for Orson's instincts. The deputy lunged, knocking Jeb aside, and Farnsworth's bullet sliced harmlessly through the air. Annabelle screamed, dropping to the ground. The posse returned fire. One of Farnsworth's men toppled with a cry. Farnsworth ducked, firing wildly as he moved behind a pillar on the porch. "Stop!" Dr. Caldwell hollered, but no one listened. Gunshots rang out in rapid succession. Jeb took aim and fired at Farnsworth's position. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Farnsworth, pinned down, cursed loudly. "Caldwell, get to the horses!" Jeb heard him yell. Dr. Caldwell made a run for it, but Deputy Sam stepped in his path, raising a rifle. Caldwell froze, hands in the air. Farnsworth realized he was alone. The second hired gun was down, moaning and clutching his leg. "Enough," Jeb shouted. "Farnsworth, toss out your weapon and come out with your hands up." For a moment, Jeb thought Farnsworth might fight to the bitter end. But at last, Farnsworth's revolver clattered to the porch boards. He emerged, face twisted with hate. "You're making a big mistake, Sheriff," he hissed. Jeb stepped forward and yanked Farnsworth's hands behind his back, binding them with rope. The immediate threat was over, but the deeper conspiracy remained. Inside the house, Jeb Orson and Annabelle made their way to Farnsworth's private study. Paneled walls, bookshelves, stuffed with leather-bound volumes, and a large oak desk exuded wealth. Jeb scanned the room. "He's got a safe in here somewhere." Annabelle searched the shelves while Jeb and Orson examined the desk. They found a large painting of a hunting scene. Jeb suspected a safe might be behind it. Carefully, he lifted the painting off the wall, revealing a steel door with a combination lock. "Let's see if Mulligan's tip holds up," Jeb said. He spun the dial to 1878. There was a satisfying click. The safe door swung open. Inside, they found an iron box filled with documents, deeds to land around Drywater Gulch, and letters bearing an official seal from the office of Judge Marcus Caldwell. The contents spelled out the entire operation. Farnsworth purchased land cheaply. Judge Caldwell would route the railroad through those parcels, and they'd resell at enormous profit. One letter even explicitly referenced intimidation tactics, referencing the guns Farnsworth was to use. Annabelle's eyes filled with tears of relief and anger. "Here's our proof, Sheriff." Jeb nodded grimly. "We'll keep these under lock and key in the mayor's office. Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell are done in this territory." From the doorway, Farnsworth, escorted by Deputy Sam, spat at the ground. "You'll regret this, Cole. Judge Caldwell's influence reaches far. You're just a nobody sheriff in a two-bit desert town." Jeb fixed him with an unwavering stare. "Then it's time someone stood up to men like Caldwell." He motioned Orson. "Take Farnsworth and Caldwell to the jail. Have Billings and Alvarez guard the outbuilding with the guns. We'll send a telegram to the authorities in Tucson." The next day dawned crisp and clear, as if the desert itself sighed with relief. Word spread that the sheriff had taken Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell into custody. Townspeople murmured in hushed groups about the conspiracy. Some doubted Farnsworth, with all his wealth, would actually face justice. Others, emboldened by the sheriff's fearless actions, hoped for a fair outcome. Mayor Harrington placed the incriminating documents in a locked cabinet in his office, pending the arrival of a circuit judge from Tucson. The local telegraph operator, a wiry man named Lionel Bixby, had sent out urgent wires about the arrests. Now they had only to wait for official reinforcements to finalize the charges. Annabelle found herself at loose ends. She sat outside the jailhouse on a bench, gazing at the dusty street. Jeb approached, tipping his hat. "You doing all right, Miss Tate?" She offered a small smile. "Better than I was." "Thank you, Sheriff, for everything." He settled beside her, careful of his bandaged shoulder. "I'm just doing my job. Farnsworth is going to have his day in court, and with all that evidence, I doubt he'll slip away." She nodded, looking at the horizon. "I never wanted any of this. I came out west because I thought, well, a new beginning. My father died, and I was left alone with barely any means. Then Farnsworth's marriage proposal came like a miracle. He promised security, a home. But it was a lie." Jeb studied her profile, the way the morning sun caught highlights in her hair. "You can still have a new beginning, Annabelle." You're free of Farnsworth now." Her eyes glistened. "I'm not sure where to go or what to do. But for the first time in a while, I feel hopeful." He offered her a gentle smile. "That's a fine feeling to have." From inside the jailhouse, Farnsworth's voice erupted in curses at Orson, who was none too patient with him. Jeb sighed, rising to his feet. "Excuse me. Duty calls." Annabelle nodded, and as Jeb entered the jailhouse, she silently thanked the fates for guiding her away from that doomed wedding and into the arms of justice. A week passed, filled with tense anticipation. The circuit judge from Tucson was delayed, so Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell remained locked up. Meanwhile, Mulligan clung to life under Doc Wilcox's care, though his condition wavered. Still, he gave the sheriff sworn statements about the gun running. Then one afternoon, a stagecoach rattled into town bearing a tall, imposing man in black robes, Judge Percy Halcombe, the circuit judge dispatched from Tucson to preside over Farnsworth's hearing. But Judge Halcombe wasn't alone. Stepping off the stage behind him was another figure, older, regal in posture, with piercing eyes. A hush fell over the gathered townsfolk as they recognized him from whispered descriptions, the infamous Judge Marcus Caldwell. He had come in person, presumably to exert his influence and rescue his investment. Dr. Horace Caldwell's father, or uncle, perhaps no one was entirely sure of the relationship. But the scowl on the older Caldwell's face spoke volumes. Jeb felt a chill. Could Judge Halcombe be swayed by Caldwell's presence, or was he truly independent? As the two judges entered the mayor's office, Jeb, Orson, and the mayor followed. Farnsworth was brought in under guard, while Dr. Caldwell trailed with shackles on his wrists, face tight with anxiety. Judge Halcombe rapped his gavel on the mayor's desk. "We'll do a preliminary hearing. Sheriff, present the evidence." Jeb handed over the letter's deeds and Mulligan's signed affidavit. He explained how Farnsworth had conspired with Dr. Caldwell to buy land ahead of the railroad using intimidation. Mulligan's statement confirmed Farnsworth was acting under the instructions of Judge Marcus Caldwell. Judge Halcombe's expression hardened as he read, but Judge Marcus Caldwell stepped forward. "This is preposterous. I have never seen these letters. They must be forgeries. This entire fiasco is a scheme to tarnish my impeccable reputation. Sheriff, you are meddling in matters beyond your station." Halcombe lifted a brow at the elder Caldwell. "The documents match your official seal, your signature. Are you claiming the sheriff fabricated them?" Judge. Caldwell stiffened. "I'm claiming unscrupulous individuals have used my name." Farnsworth. "Do you confirm this is all a misunderstanding?" Farnsworth. Desperation in his eyes tried to cling to any lifeline. "Yes, Your Honor," he lied. "I was misled, tricked by unscrupulous men who used your name. The sheriff is twisting the facts." Annabelle stepped forward, fists clenched. "That's not true. I heard you, Farnsworth. You threatened to kill me if I revealed your arms deals, and Dr. Caldwell was there with you discussing Judge Caldwell's involvement." Judge Halcombe gazed at Annabelle. "And you are—" "Annabelle Tate," she said, chin high. "Farnsworth's former fiancée. I have no reason to lie. I only want justice for what I was dragged into." Judge Caldwell's lips thinned. "She's an opportunist, no doubt." But Judge Halcombe held up a hand. "Enough. The seriousness of these accusations demands further inquiry." Sheriff Cole. "You have Farnsworth in custody. You have Dr. Caldwell as well. I will examine the authenticity of these documents personally. If they're valid, Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell will stand trial for conspiracy attempted murder and more. As for you, Marcus Caldwell, your involvement will be scrutinized thoroughly. If these letters are indeed from you, there will be consequences. For once, the older Caldwell's commanding presence faltered. He shot Farnsworth a look of pure venom. Farnsworth bowed his head, sweat beading on his brow. Judge Halcombe nodded at Jeb. "Sheriff, keep these men confined under strict guard until I complete my investigation." Jeb tipped his hat. "Yes, Your Honor." With Judge Halcombe presiding, the next few days were a whirlwind of statements, witness accounts, and close examination of the seized documents. Mulligan, brought in on a stretcher, repeated his confession in front of the judge. Even Farnsworth's own hired guards admitted that Farnsworth had stored crates of weapons. Dr. Caldwell tried to paint himself as a mere consultant from Philadelphia, ignorant of Farnsworth's illegal activities, but his letters to Judge Caldwell hinted strongly otherwise. The elder Caldwell tried every trick in the book, claiming his seal had been stolen, that the letters were falsified. However, expert scrutiny revealed the writing and seal were genuine. Eventually, Judge Halcombe ruled that Farnsworth and Dr. Horace Caldwell would be transferred to a more secure facility in Tucson to await formal trial. As for Marcus Caldwell, Halcombe declared that any judge found guilty of corruption would be removed from the bench and face criminal charges, though that would have to be settled in a higher court. For now, the older Caldwell was placed under house arrest at the local boarding house, guarded by 2 armed deputies. When the final pronouncement echoed through the makeshift courtroom, the citizens of Drywater Gulch breathed a collective sigh of relief. Danger still lurked in the form of Caldwell's far-reaching influence, but for the moment, justice had a foothold. On a balmy evening after the hearing, Jeb and Annabelle found themselves strolling along the edge of town. The sky shimmered with streaks of orange and purple as the sun sank below the hills. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sagebrush. "I can't thank you enough," Sheriff Annabelle said, her tone wistful yet warm. "You saved my life, and you saved this town from a dangerous conspiracy." He shrugged, though he smiled. "Just doing my duty. Besides, you're the one who first exposed Farnsworth's lies." She laughed softly. "Not on purpose. I was just desperate to get out of a bad situation." They paused near a weathered fence, looking out at the tumbleweed-strewn plains. Jeb took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. "What do you plan to do now?" Annabelle inhaled, letting the desert air fill her lungs. "I need to find my footing. Perhaps I'll stay here in Drywater Gulch for a while. People have been kind. Harriet's even offered me some work in her seamstress shop." "That's good," Jeb said. "We could use more folks like you, honest, courageous." A subtle blush rose on her cheeks. "Sheriff, are you flirting with me?" He cleared his throat, a faint smile at his lips. "Well, I won't deny I enjoy your company." Her eyes sparkled. "The feeling is mutual." They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence. Then Annabelle tucked her arm through Jeb's. "Let's head back. The day's been long, but there's a new sunrise on the horizon for both of us." In the days that followed, Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell were taken to Tucson under armed escort, joined eventually by Mulligan, still under heavy guard, as a key witness. Marcus Caldwell, red-faced and outraged, found his reputation in tatters. A formal investigation was launched into his dealings, and no one in Drywater Gulch doubted he'd face significant consequences. Sheriff Jeb Cole once again walked his patrols through town, nodding politely to passers-by, who tipped their hats or curtsied in gratitude. Drywater Gulch felt a little safer, a little more hopeful, and in a quiet moment when the dust settled, he'd share a cup of coffee or a smile with Annabel Tate, whose life had changed forever the moment she climbed out that church window in a torn wedding dress. On a certain afternoon, a telegraph arrived from Tucson. The charges against Farnsworth and Dr. Caldwell were upheld. A date for their trial was set, and their conviction seemed likely. Mayor Harrington read the news aloud in front of the gathered townspeople. A cheer went up, echoing off the wooden storefronts. That evening, Jeb found Annabel on the front porch of the boarding house gazing at the setting sun. "They're finished," he said quietly, stepping beside her. "You're free, truly free." She turned to him, relief shining in her eyes. "Yes, I am." He hesitated, then gently took her hand. "Annabel, I was thinking, maybe we could." She smiled softly, reading the question in his eyes. "I'd like that very much, Jeb." And so, under the vibrant canvas of the western sky, they shared a moment that spoke of hope, healing, and the promise of new beginnings. The runaway bride had found her courage, the sheriff his faith in justice, and Drywater Gulch a renewed sense of peace, at least until the next wild wind blew through the dusty streets of the frontier. Thank you for joining us on this gripping ride across the untamed frontier, where dust-choked secrets met righteous law, and a runaway bride found her true strength. Sheriff Jeb Cole's discovery in that jail cell turned a sleepy desert town into the stage for a high-stakes drama. A tangled web of corruption, hidden railroads, and powerful families nearly destroyed Drywater Gulch, but justice fueled by courage and truth prevailed. If this tale of Wild West danger and redemption kept you hooked, we invite you to show your support. Hit that like button, share this story with fellow Western fans, and subscribe to our channel for more legendary sagas of frontier justice. Stay tuned, folks. There's always another tall tale just beyond the horizon, waiting for the next brave soul to chase the setting sun and bring law to the lawless. Until then, ride safe.